Last month, Mark Barnes, the editor of a magazine out of Steubenville, Ohio called New Polity, wrote a blog post with a provocative command: delete Magisterium AI. So what was Barnes's argument in a nutshell?
My problem with this, and I think it should be everyone's problem with this, is that there is no one responsible for what's said or what's apparently said. It's probabilistic, and it's irresponsible, and it's fake.
Magisterium AI, a large language model, or LLM, was launched in July 2023 to provide Catholics and interested seekers with accurate information about church questions. Longbeard, the company that founded Magisterium AI, trained their LLM solely on magisterial documents, the writings of church fathers, and the works of the saints. But Barnes's blog post took issue with the very form of accessing information about faith through a bot.
By probabilistic, I just mean that there's no concern for truth. What comes out of the machine is what comes out of the machine. And by irresponsible, I mean that there's no one who is standing behind the things that the machine says. And what chatbots do is they appear to be saying them, but without anyone responsible for them.
Words that appear on a chatbot screen produced by an LLM seem no different than words that appear in a text message from a friend or in a book or magazine article. But Barnes said they are different because they're not actually coming from anyone.
And then the final thing is I just think it's fake. I think we live in an increasingly fake world where everything we do is mediated through screens and where we no longer have the trust in each other's personal presence. And I think the move to have the Catholic Church represented in the same mode as the way this fake world is increasingly represented is actually a detriment to the Catholic Church shining as a light to all the nations. Instead, I think the Catholic Church should do things that are eminently and profoundly real.
In Barnes's eyes, reality is attenuating as our lives are imported onto screens and become more and more digital. The church, he suggests, might try to meet this moment differently.
Our world is suffering a crisis of loneliness. People have less friends than they ever have had in the past. People join less institutions than they ever have. People come from smaller families than they ever had. Again and again, there's just less people in people's lives. The number of people who do not have someone to turn to when they have serious questions is real. And it should not lead the Catholic to say, well, then how can I produce a chatbot in order to be a part of that? But rather it should say, how do we practice the works of mercy so that we are in encounter with more people, where we are preaching the gospel in a tangible way, where we have personal presence as our explicit goal as we go about evangelizing? Because I do think we're in an era where the most effective evangelization is going to be first and foremost your personal presence to the other person, which is increasingly a rare thing in our society.
Barnes finds inspiration in how Pope Leo XIV is addressing the fears of this singular moment.
I think we should all be very attentive to Pope Leo as he addresses AI head on. And I'm so grateful that we have a pope who's made this a part of his ministry. He has so much more to say, and we're all eagerly anticipating his first encyclical on this subject. But what he said so far is really important, and that's that you are not replaceable. You're not replaceable in your work. You're not replaceable in your words. You're not replaceable in your creativity. The universe needs you. and that if we live in an era where our economies seem to be fueled on the replacement of people, then as Christians, we should go in the opposite direction and fuel our own evangelical efforts on affirming the irreplaceable status of every human person.
2 weeks ago, Mark Barnes brought his debate to Matthew Harvey Sanders, CEO of Longbeard, in person. Sort of. The Faith in AI Project hosted the two men to hash out their ideas in a recorded podcast. Sanders shared his case with Iowa Catholic Radio. So here's why not delete Magisterium AI.
As people of the 21st century, how would we feel about going back and telling someone at the onset of the printing press that, no, don't bother. It's not actually going to help anyone. Just smash it to bits. I think we think that's outrageous. And I kind of feel like in the future, I could see our ancestors looking back, right, and serving a very similar analogy to AI. And I think that's what we're going to find when 20 years from now, when we look back. This was one of the most instrumental technologies ever been created, and it's responsible for enormous good. So I think deleting it or just ignoring AI ultimately doesn't serve humanity, and I certainly don't think it serves the faith.
You mentioned this other metaphor of the golden path, of a way for technology to serve faith and to serve human agency and the dignity of the human person. What are some ways in which a tech company like yours can practically implement this golden path to take us towards this telos of human flourishing?
Well, I mean, as a technology company, we have a very kind of specific and narrow role, but I think it's still an important one. I think that's namely just to understand the role of technology. So what it should be doing and what it should not be doing. The technology, insofar as it helps distill, 2,000 years of wisdom and insight and help make it applicable to our daily lives, I think it's a very useful thing. And I think as a tool, it's very well equipped to serve that purpose. It's not intended, nor is it designed to be some kind of substitute for meaningful human relationships. So a lot of this just comes down to rightly ordering the technology and ensuring that it serves human flourishing instead of impedes it.
There's been studies that have shown how many young people are engaging with chatbots as people and as romantic partners and as friends, as pseudo therapists. So how do you practically sort of implement a way of making that machine look different, that signals to maybe vulnerable or less trained minds?
I think a lot of this comes down to just very intentional design decisions. And if you're intentionally designing the system to be a system, and it has a user interface, and yes, you communicate with it with text, and yes, we have voice, as that's also sometimes a medium for people to use. But the AI is not trying to kind of engage you on an emotional level, right? It's not trying to go deeper and develop a friendship. It knows that's not what it exists for. And therefore, it's not trying to replace, or I would say confuse people into thinking it's more than it is.
No matter how intentional the design, however, programmers cannot account for user error. And users live in a world increasingly impoverished of personal encounter.
I think that the risks really come when there's desperate people, and they're desperate for human connection, and they're seeking that connection anywhere they can find it, particularly in places where they feel they won't be judged, where they can have a certain sense of anonymity. So that's not to say that I don't think there's real risks with this technology. There definitely is, but I think that's why it's so important for the church to model, the right way to use it. I mean, I think that's what we're trying to do.
In Sanders' response to Barnes, he used another metaphor of the mason in the quarry to describe his work and the watchman on the tower to describe Barnes's response. He explained this creative tension between their roles.
Whenever you're building or inventing something, whenever you're trying to solve a problem, right? There's those who are working on the problem, who are doing the masonry, assembling it, deploying it. And then there are the people who are watching, who are using the product and providing feedback. And that's kind of the dynamic I saw. Mark is seeing what we're doing, and he has a certain conviction that we should be doing it differently. And we welcome those insights. But ultimately, just because people feel that there's some things we need to do differently, or we need to optimize or change, doesn't mean we should abandon the work. The blog post was titled "Delete Matters from AI." So, I think in many ways that is a direct call to action. But I think Mark was saying more than that. I think he recognizes that, deleting matters from AI is not likely to happen, and AI is not going to go anywhere. I think that was kind of a dramatic way of getting people's attention. The more important point he's trying to make is that he has concerns that this technology really needs to be thoughtfully deployed, and he hopes that we're listening. And what I really want to tell him in my response is we're listening.
You can keep listening to their debate at the Faith in AI Project or on New Polity's website. For Iowa Catholic Radio, I'm Renee Roden.
Listen to the Catholic Morning Show weekdays at 7 a.m. Central on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network, iowacatholicradio.com, or the Iowa Catholic Radio app.